Hi, and welcome to another segment of This Week in Fake News. I'm your host, Candice Malcolm, founder of True North and a columnist over at Post Media with the Toronto Sun. So once again, lots to get to this week. It's now the election period. The writ was drawn up this week, so we're full on in the middle of the political war that will be unfolding over the next few weeks before Canada chooses a new government and perhaps even a new prime minister. So let's jump right into it. I want to start with some amusing thing that happened just a couple of days ago. So my colleague Andrew Lawton went over to Ottawa to sit in on a conference held by Canada 2020. Canada 2020 is a kind of big L liberal group. A lot of the people involved kind of have the same sort of centrist worldview as the Liberal Party, and they promote a lot of the same issues that the Liberals are promoting. So they held an event called Combating Misinformation, Protecting Democracy in the Public Sphere in 2019. And, this is just a favorite topic these days from elites and liberals in Canada. They're kind of obsessed with this idea that there's misinformation online, that there's fake news that's being put out that's sort of coming only from one side. So, as we all know, there's a lot of fake news out there. This show focuses almost entirely on the fake news put out by the mainstream media. Journalists do it all the time. I try to catch them and expose it, but they come up with their own story. They have their own narrative, their own agenda, and they really do create stories that oftentimes come from nowhere, or they really just exaggerate or emphasize or show their own bias. So this is super common, but according to elites and liberals in this country, it's really a one-sided problem. They see it coming from conservatives. They basically consider any news that's coming from a conservative to be fake news. The other problem for them is that Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, just happens to be a very memeable guy. He's kind of a person that's easy to poke fun at and to make fun of. He's very expressive, so you can always find him, find pictures of him, and then couple it with some of his sort of more outlandish, ridiculous comments or his policies. And there's a lot of people who spend time online making fun of the Prime Minister. And, the thin-skinned liberals, Trudeau himself is thin-skinned, they hate this. So they've come up with this whole initiative to kind of combat the disinformation online. They pretend it's like a one-sided problem when we know it's not. And I've caught them doing this many times. They truly believe that conservative opinion and news coming from people who are conservatives is fake news. So the Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, once called my opinion column, an opinion column that I wrote in the Toronto Sun, she called it fake news because she disagreed with my opinion. So that pretty much sums it up. I mean, they clearly just say that something is fake news because they disagree with it. And, now they're coming up with a whole initiative in government to combat fake news. And, this is really what they want to talk about. They want to talk a lot about this issue, and they want to pretend that somehow there's some kind of like a foreign interference. It's just like what happened in the States with Trump. They're trying to repeat it up here and claim that like any ground that conservatives gain or any, success that conservatives have electorally, they're going to blame it on misinformation and foreign interference. We can see the writing on the wall right now. And so this conference was held in Ottawa. There's one particularly amusing thing that I wanted to point out. So again, my colleague Andrew Lawton was live tweeting the event, and there's lots of good stuff on there, so check out his page on Twitter. But so the very first panel that he attended, one of the panelists is a person called Katie Gibbs of Evidence for Democracy. So it's an organization. And Gibbs says that her organization will no longer use the term fake news. And that's because she thinks that the term leads people to associate the news media with fakery. Stop using that word, she says, opting instead for misinformation. So, of course, that's the whole thing, that the mainstream media does put out fake news. There was just a study a couple weeks ago that found that the most misinformed Canadians were the Canadians that watch the most amount of mainstream media news. So it's true that the mainstream media is associated with fakery. She's on to that, so she no longer uses the term fake news, opting instead for misinformation. And this is just so typical of the politically correct liberal elites in this country. They're finding yet another term to ban. So sooner or later it will just be completely unacceptable to use the term fake news, and they'll call out anyone who does as being like some kind of a conspiratorial person or something. They've done this over and over again. I pointed this out. The mainstream media and liberal politicians used to routinely use the term illegal immigration. They used the term illegal immigration to describe illegal immigration, which Canada has a problem with. There's a significant amount of illegal immigration happening in Canada. The Liberals deny that it's happening, and just one day, about 2 years ago, they woke up and decided that it was racist to use the term illegal immigration, and they started calling out the Ontario Ford government for doing this, and again, just saying that it was, the immigration minister said that it was un-Canadian, and it was intolerant and it was racist to use the term illegal immigration. And so they decided instead that the term that they were going to use was irregular immigration. Irregular immigration, it doesn't even really make sense in English. It doesn't sound right. It's just mumbo jumbo. It's a politically correct term that the Liberals invented. And as soon as they did, the mainstream media fell in line. And so almost immediately you saw the CBC, Toronto Star, all these other publications that used to use the term illegal immigration suddenly shifting and using the term irregular immigration. And then you even had journalists jumping in and correcting politicians and others for using the term illegal.
We don't want our RCMP officers to welcome them. They're illegal migrants, and so we must be sure that if they want to come to our country, they have to follow our immigration law, and that's very important for us.
I think the correct term is irregular migrants, is it not?
So the memo went out. The Liberals snapped their finger, banished a word from our common public parlance, and now we use the word irregular immigration. So looking forward to the term fake news to be next in there. So let's move on. One of the things that's kind of sad and unfortunate state of affairs in our country is just the lack of free speech that we have, especially for people who want to run for public office. So we see this every election season. As soon as the new batch of candidates is announced, as soon as the writ starts, the writ's drawn up and the election period starts, we see a new list of candidates, and almost immediately they all become like targets. All these research groups, opposition research groups, starts digging through their past, filing through any public comment they might have made when they were a teenager on Twitter, or 15 years ago, a Facebook comment, whatever it is. So we're seeing lots and lots of that, and just in the first few days of the campaign. I went on the news site, National News Watch, which is just a horribly left-wing publication, but basically every single story on there was about a candidate basically getting pounded, some of them stepping down and getting disqualified for things that they had said years and years ago. So here, right now, as I'm recording this, the top story on National News Watch, Conservative candidate apologizes unequivocally for alleged homophobic comments on Twitter. So this is something that the guy said years and years ago, and then it turns out that the Liberal candidate that was accusing him of making these homophobic comments, well, she in her past had also been associated with homophobic comments, and comments that her husband had made were even far worse than what this guy said. So that's the top stories. Another story, PPC, the People's Party of Canada, ousts candidate who asks Bernier to denounce racism. So that party showing that they don't really tolerate a divergence of ideas and free speech here. Another story, the Conservatives are again accusing the Conservatives of being anti-abortion, and the Liberals are shaming. Here's Caroline Bennett tweeting saying, "Is the abortion debate really closed, Andrew Scheer? You've chosen to launch your Toronto campaign in York Centre alongside your leading anti-choice, pro-life candidate and campaigner. Her top priority is ending abortion." So again, the Liberals really want to talk about abortion. They really want to be to have the Conservatives associated with abortion, even though Andrew Scheer has said that he's not going to talk about the issue. It really shows that there is no pro-life party in Canada. Like the Conservatives are probably the most welcoming to pro-life people, but they're not a pro-life party. They are a pro-choice party, and Andrew Scheer is making that very clear that he will not push forward. If he's elected Prime Minister, he won't do anything to limit abortions in Canada. So the Liberals are now condemning the Conservatives even just for having a candidate who herself, in her personal views and her personal life, opposes abortion. So again, like the idea that you have all these different parties that represent different viewpoints and different people in society, that's like no longer true. We're getting a narrower and narrower amount of things that are permissible to talk about in our society. Like now you can't even be pro-life and run for public office. That's kind of what the liberals are implying here. So, there's a very narrow realm of what we can talk about when it comes to immigration. We can't really talk about a lot of things that people consider beyond the pale, and you get accused of being racist if you criticize immigration too harshly, or if you criticize diversity. And now they're really saying that you're only fit for public office if you happen to be pro-abortion. Well, and guess what? There's lots and lots of Canadians. There's millions of Canadians out there who personally oppose abortion. And what the Liberals are saying is that those people don't deserve any representation in Parliament, and they're really forcing Andrew Scheer to denounce abortion. It's kind of sad, just the state of what we can talk about, and what we can believe in public life. Here's another story. Montreal NDP candidate steps down, denies accusations of domestic abuse. Yikes. So this guy is being accused of domestic abuse, and he stepped down. Here's another one. Contradictory environmental stance by Green Party. So this one's kind of amusing. A Green Party MP 6 years ago, tweeted this: "We're technically still in an ice age that began 2.6 million years ago. Well, what if global warming is just the end of that ice age?" So basically just saying that the temperature is always changing. Well, apparently that's not within the realm of what you can believe if you're a Green Party candidate. And so this guy's getting under fire for like a super innocuous tweet that I would imagine lots and lots of Canadians, again, probably millions of Canadians, agree with this perspective. But this guy's coming under fire. Here's another one. This Green Party candidate resigned over a post about mailing pig carcasses to Muslims. This one's pretty dicey. So this guy, he posts a picture from a barbecue back in 2007. So we're now looking 12 years into the past. He posts this picture and he's at a pig roast, and he jokingly commented that they were going to send the leftovers to Denmark in support of the protesters over the Muhammad cartoon. So you remember back in 2007, there was a huge uproar because a Danish cartoonist published a picture depicting the Muslim prophet Muhammad that created huge protests all over the sort of extremist, illiberal parts of the world that don't believe in any kind of free speech and want to impose their blasphemy laws. So, the people who were protesting against that were like the most extreme people in society. But anyway, nonetheless, it's a pretty, it's again 12 years ago, and clearly it's a joke. But you probably shouldn't joke about mailing pig carcasses to Islamist extremists. And again, this kind of just shows that you can't really have a sense of humor if you're going to be talking about politically incorrect things. So that guy's gone, no longer a candidate over that. Now here's the far left news publication that typically, frequently lies and spins and is just very, very anti-conservative. They dug up a secret Facebook page from a conservative candidate in Manitoba, who once posted a meme saying that he was proud to be white. So that guy's gone. He resigned. Again, just so many candidates, so many people, and it's kind of sad. Even if some of the individual instances, the person says something that is, not great, dicey, or not politically correct. It's kind of sad in our society that there's this mob mentality that as soon as you find someone who said something that was politically correct, even if it was 10, 15 years ago, there's a mob that attacks a person and then they get disqualified. Sooner or later, there won't be any Canadians left to run for public office, especially Canadians of my generation who kind of have had social media all along. And, it shows that we don't really have a lot of free speech in our society. If you say things that are politically correct or that are interpreted as being politically correct 10, 15 years later, then you are disqualified and you can't be part of Parliament. You can't be part of the democratic process. Or if you have views that the mainstream media and liberal elites deem to be outside the realm of polite conversation or mainstream views, like if you just happen to oppose abortion, or you happen to believe that global warming is also associated with natural trends like the sun, then you're just disqualified and you can't be part of our democracy. It's kind of sad. I wish that during elections we had higher tolerance for past discretions, especially, if someone apologizes, if someone says, look, I made a really bad joke 12 years ago and I am remorseful and I apologize, they shouldn't have to resign and get removed from their position. It kind of shows a sad trend that we're heading towards with this sort of mob mentality, political correct police, monitoring everything we say. It's very Orwellian in 1984, that you can't say things freely out of fear that maybe 10 years from now they might be taken out of context. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll be back next week and we'll probably talk more about election topics and what's emerging as sort of the most important issues in the election. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, you like this podcast, please like it and share it. Don't forget to check out our website, tnc.news. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great weekend.